My name is Joseph. I work for the Wine and Spirit Education Trust. Can I just see quickly how many of you have done a qualification or a course with WSET before? Okay, fantastic. I guess we've probably got about a 50-50 split in the room, more or less. So some of what I'm talking about today will be familiar to some of you. To the rest of you, maybe this is new information. What you're going to see is a WSET approach to a subject. Today we're going to be looking specifically at sparkling wines. We're going to be looking at sparkling wines, or a couple of sparkling wines, that we don't actually usually study on our courses. We're looking at some regions that are outside our normal courses. But what we can do, and what's really important with WSET courses, is we can apply the knowledge we've learned from other regions, put that into the context of a new region, and start to understand it a bit better. See what the similarities are with some of those regions we're more familiar with those processes we're more familiar with. What are the similarities? What are the differences? So just to give you a little bit of my background, I work and live in London, but I look after our course providers and promote our courses across Europe, mainly in Southern Europe, Spain, Italy, and the Balkans predominantly. So that's a little bit of the work I do. What WSET does in general around the world, we have 4 different levels of courses, from real beginner introduction courses, where we just want people to understand the basics of wine, spirits, or sake, whichever subject they're studying, right through to level 4, where we go into a lot more detail about production. We start considering, why does this wine taste like this? And we expect our students to be able to explain that to other people. Okay? So we teach these courses, then we test people on what they've learned, and then we give them a certificate so they can go around and tell everyone, these are the skills I have, this is what I've learned on that course. So that's what WSET does. I'll do just a little bit of information. Please, get in touch with us by social media, follow us. We've also just released a new app, which you might not be aware of. This is a really convenient way for you to store all your tasting notes, and it follows the systematic approach to tasting, which is something specific to WSET. If you don't know about that, by the end of today's session, you'll hopefully know a little bit more. We're going to be looking at it at level 2 today. So this is a fantastic way to store it. It's completely free to download, so absolutely do that. Right, let's move on to sparkling wine. What are our sort of common reference points for sparkling wine? What are the sort of famous regions we associate with sparkling wine? Champagne, okay, that's the first one I hear. Or maybe Cava, exactly, for a second. These are our 3 sort of big production zones for the world of sparkling wines. What we're going to be looking at today are production methods that are familiar really with the champagne process, but used in different regions in different ways. And we're going to be looking at specifically on different types of climate and the effect this has on the final wine. But we're also going to be looking at what are the original effects upon that climate. So if we think about the Champagne region, we're in northern France. We have a naturally cool climate because of latitude. We're quite far away from the equator. We're sort of the northern limit, really, of where grapes are grown traditionally. Where I'm from in southern England, this is a more recent development that we've started to grow vines and make sparkling wine in a similar way to champagne. So what are people trying to do to emulate champagne and find regions around the world which are suitable for sparkling wine production? Why is a cool climate important? And we've got to think about the end product. What are we looking to achieve? Generally in sparkling wine, we're looking to achieve something that's relatively dry, something that's light-bodied, refreshing, has good acidity, and a cool climate helps to produce these wines. The cooler temperatures, less sugar accumulation. Less sugar accumulation means lower alcohol, so we're going to keep these wines nice and light, certainly when we make our original base wine. And also we want a certain flavour profile. We're not looking for big, rich, baked fruit aromas here. Generally we're searching for citrus fruit aromas maybe, or a relatively neutral base wine, because the next step in the production process is going to add further complexity. So we don't want to start off with a wine that's too complex. We want something nice and light, and the cool climate helps to provide this. We think about also in the vineyard what we're doing that's specific to these cool climate wines. We're going to be picking our grapes quite early, because again, we don't want lots of sugar accumulation, lots of ripeness in the fruit. We're also going to be picking these grapes by hand, because we want to create a very delicate first wine. So we don't want these grape skins to be damaged, we don't want the grapes to oxidize, because then when we go into the winery, we're going to do a nice gentle press, get a very clear liquid to make our base wine. So these are some of the sort of common characteristics that we might associate with the vineyard. We've got to be aware of some dangers as well with these climates, because of the risk of things like frost, or even sort of really harsh damage to the vines over winter if we go very low freezing conditions. And some of the regions we're looking at today, we can definitely get into those extremes. So there's something to be aware of. What I quite like to do is sort of jump straight into our first sample, which we have here. All these wines today are from the same producer. For those with good reading, we've got all Chandon wines, okay? Tells us a couple of things from that label. Here it says traditional method, or méthode traditionnelle. This is basically describing the champagne process for production. We can't say it's the champagne method anymore on labels, because that's something specific to the Champagne region. But this is absolutely the same process of production. Okay? Also, the name Chandon should be ringing bells if you don't already know that this is coming from the world's biggest champagne producer, Moet Chandon. Okay? So they are using, again, those skills and that knowledge to produce these wines in different climates, in different regions around the world. So, wine sample number 1. I just want us to go straight into the tasting and have a look at this wine. In your books, you've all got copies of the systematic approach to tasting, and we'll basically be following this with all of the wines, okay? I won't have a chance to sort of fully explain how we use this today, but I'm very happy to do that after the session and how it develops at different levels. But this is level 2. So, we'd start off with have a look at this wine, and we'd say it's pale, it's lemon coloured, but that doesn't tell us a whole lot of information, so we stick our nose in it, have a smell. Okay, so we get those lovely delicate aromas of citrus fruit in there. Really fresh lime and lemon, really fresh green apple, a little bit of a floral complexity to it as well, I'd say. So sort of white blossom in there. There's a touch of something else, but I just want us to focus on those fruit characteristics to start with, because that's a direct result of where we're growing these vines, and then how we're treating those vines in the vineyard. So in Argentina, where this wine comes from, these vines are being grown in Mendoza, in Uco Valley, and they're being grown at a very high altitude. They're being grown at between 1,000 meters and 1,600 meters. You'll notice in Argentina, we're only at about sort of 30, 35 degrees latitude here. We're far closer to the equator than Champagne is, far closer. So we need to get our coolness from another natural feature, and that natural feature here is the altitude. The temperature is going to reduce as we go up in altitude. Every 100 meters, we're reducing the temperature on average by about 0.6 degrees Celsius. And we've gone up 1,000 meters, 1,600 meters in this region. So what's that going to do? It means that the grapes get ripe during the day, they collect that lovely sunlight, that's being converted into sugar, the grapes are ripening, we're developing fruit flavours, but the nights are incredibly cool by comparison. Okay, so the temperature is dropping by about 16 degrees between day and night, and that's helping to retain that freshness. It means the aromatics that develops in the grapes aren't burnt off during the night as well. We're retaining that. We're also retaining acidity. And we'll see in this first sample, when we have a sip, the acidity is really noticeable. Okay, for those who haven't done any of our courses before, the way we always approach acidity when we're doing a tasting is paying attention to the sides of our tongue. If we get a slight sort of prickling sensation, if the sides of our tongue starts to water, and you get that immediately with this wine. If that's your first wine of the day, that's going to feel like the most fresh sort of lime juice almost from the acidity. Okay, we've got a light-bodied wine. We've got sort of a medium alcohol here, okay, but it's because of that acidity, that's reducing the perception of the body as well. So this is a light-bodied wine. In terms of a finish, I'd actually say this is quite a long finish. It's not a complex wine, there aren't lots of different flavours going on, but the finish is actually approaching long. If we were in a level 3 classroom, I'd maybe have a discussion with students of is this medium plus, is this long finish? But I think for today we can sort of put this in the long category. But it's not, it's nice and fresh, it's nice and refreshing on the palate with that acidity is the key feature. Okay, but I want to talk about something else that we might be tasting there, and there's that slight yeasty character going on. It's not very strong in this. When we move on to the next wines, you'll see it more pronounced. And how are we achieving that slight yeasty, biscuity flavour? And that all comes from the production method in the winery. And this is to complement these natural conditions that we have in the vineyard. What do we do when we're making wines in these extreme locations? We need to deal with the wine in a specific way to make sure that it's a drinkable, saleable product at the end of the day, that people want to come back and have more. So, we talked about pressing the grapes, really gentle press. We're going to do a first fermentation, a normal fermentation in a tank. Nothing particularly complicated. We're looking to create quite a simple base wine. Something around a lowish alcohol of about 11% ABV. So you compare that to most of the wines we've been trying this week around the fair, 11% is really low alcohol compared to most still wines, especially in the current market. So, what are we doing then to create our finished product? We then put the wine into a bottle, into individual bottles, and as well as that base wine, we're going to reintroduce some yeast. So we're going to put a new batch of yeast in there, and we're also going to give that yeast some sugar, we're going to give it some nutrients to eat, and we might put it something in called a clarifying agent. And that's because we're going to then close the bottle and make sure it's properly sealed, and the fermentation, the second fermentation, is going to happen inside this bottle. And this is the same bottle that it's then going to be sold on in the shelves in the supermarket or be presented to you in a restaurant. So that's that same bottle. The fermentation then takes place inside of here. And what we're doing, when yeast ferments the sugar, it's creating CO2. It's creating this gas, which now has nowhere to escape. So we're building the pressure on it. This is why these bottles, sparkling wine bottles, are so strong and so heavy, because a fantastic amount of pressure is going to be created inside it, about 5 to 6 atmospheres. So that's trapped inside, and we're creating our fizz. We're also going to increase the alcohol a little bit by maybe 1.5% ABV. So that's like where we get to the sort of 12.5 figure. Started from 11% with our base wine, and then we were at sort of 12.5, and that's where you'll see a lot of sparkling wines sit, 12.5, 13% ABV. But we've not just got sparkling wine in here anymore. We've got all that other stuff that we stuck in to get that second fermentation. The yeast, the nutrients that have been consumed and then processed by the yeast as well. The sugar also. So that's now trapped inside here. And most people do not want to have their wine sold in that state, so we've got to get it out somehow. But before that, we're going to just let the wine sit as it is on what we call the lees, these dead yeast cells. And the longer it sits in contact with those yeast cells, those dead yeast cells, the more a certain flavour profile is going to develop. And that's that bready, brioche, yeasty, unsurprisingly, flavour that develops in traditional method sparkling wines. And this is specific to traditional method sparkling wines. You can create it by doing second fermentation in a tank, but the process is quite involved, and generally the tank method is reserved for more aromatic styles of wine, where we're trying to retain just the simple fruit characteristic. Here we're looking to create a second set of flavours. So, we've got all those yeast cells in there, but we do need to get rid of them. They've done a fantastic job of giving us all these extra flavours, maybe a little bit of extra body in there as well. It's also going to help the wine age and develop and become more resilient to oxygen. Okay? So that process could go on for 10 years of this wine just sitting in contact with the lees. 10 years is unusual, but it's done. It's done in Champagne, it's done in parts of Italy, fairly routinely in fact. So what we're going to do is the yeast which is sitting at the bottom of the bottle here on its side, what we're going to do is over a period of time slowly twist and invert the wine bottle. So all the lees then starts to gather in the bottom of the neck, and it ends up like this. So we've gathered all the solid matter at the bottom of the bottle. That is then put in a freezing solution. So usually like a brine, very cold solution, and you're just going to freeze this section of the bottle. So this is now completely solid in there. You're going to put it back the right way up. You're going to take off whatever stopper you've used to trap the CO2. You're going to take that off, and the pressure from inside the bottle is going to make this plug of solid matter fly out. You're then incredibly quickly going to top it back up so you can sell it at the right level of 75 cl, and you're going to top it up with some wine, some reserve wine, and you're going to top it up with some sugar. And that sugar is not going to be fermented this time, okay? That sugar is going to stay in the wine and going to come across as a little bit of sweetness. Most bottles of traditional method sparkling wine have some extra sugar added in. So for example, this wine that we tasted, we might be feeling it as dry, but if someone wanted to get technical, this is actually an off-dry bottle of wine. So this has about 9 grams of sugar per litre. If you had that in a still wine, without the high acidity, you would definitely detect it as off-dry. Here it's a bit harder because it's masked by that high acidity. Then you're going to put your cork in, which is it's far bigger, so you have to put it in under pressure, and you're going to close the bottle, and then you're going to leave the bottle for a certain amount of time and sell it on the market like that. And all the time the wine has stayed in the same bottle that we did that second fermentation in. That process of releasing this plug of solid, topping it up, and then putting a cork in, that happens in a matter of seconds. Otherwise you'd lose all that pressure in the bottle. So that's an incredibly rapid process that they do that, and that's all automated these days. So this wine here, this has had about 6 months in contact with the lees. Remember I said you could do that for up to 10 years. So this has had a really short period in lees contact, and that's why the aroma is quite delicate, of any sort of brioche, biscuity flavour here. Let's move on to the second sample. Right, so now we understand the sort of production process that's going to go into this, and we put it in the context of a new region. So we were in Argentina before, where that high altitude was going to help preserve that lovely fresh aroma and that acidity. This time we're in Napa Valley in California. Again, a region maybe more widely associated as having a warmer climate than places like Champagne, certainly. So where are the cooling influences going to come from in a region like California, in Napa? And this time it's going to come from the sea. So you'll see how close Napa is to the coastline, and in particular how close it is to this bay here, the San Pablo Bay. And what happens as pretty much a daily occurrence in this part of California is sea fog, sea mist coming inland through the bay and up this valley, which is Napa Valley, and this fog comes into the vineyard areas, and that fog is going to act like a protective cooling layer against the heat of the sun. If you were in Los Carneros, down at the bottom of the valley, and you can just see the bay here, the effect of the fog is going to be quite high. By the time you get further north into places like Rutherford, Calistoga, the effect of the fog is going to be lessened massively. Okay, it's going to burn off quicker. It might not have even reached there, depending on the conditions each day. So, in terms of sparkling wine production, we're going to prefer to be at the southern end of Napa Valley for our production, where the cooler vineyards are, because of that cooling influence of the fog. This wine here is made with a combination of grapes from Los Carneros, Yountville here, and also Mount Vida. Now, Mount Vida is this elevated area, sort of more mountainous region of Napa Valley. Now, this will have some fog influence, but the fog, remember, is going to hug sort of down at the lower levels of the valley. And so Mount Vida might have that effect in the lower vineyards, but higher up it's not. So again, when we get into those vineyard areas, we're going to depend on the cooling influences of altitude that we've already seen in Argentina. Not to the same extent, but it's certainly going to have an effect. It's also known as a cooler region because when that fog is in the valley, Mount Vida is on the west section facing east, and the sun is rising from the east. So when the morning fog is in the valley, that's helping as a barrier between the sun over here and Mount Vida over here, and you have the fog in between. As the day goes on and the fog burns off, the sun is now over here, facing the other direction. So Mount Vida is protected from the full heat of that afternoon sun, because it's facing the other way. So this is known as maybe the coolest area in Napa Valley for wine production. This is where we're seeing more of our Chardonnay and Pinot Noir that's going to be used for sparkling wine as well. And that's what we've got in glass number 2. So again, pale lemon, we can whiz through that. But on the nose, we are seeing a different sort of character on the nose. There are more of those secondary aromas, we would call them. More of those aromas from the second fermentation. So we've got some peach in there, we've got some ripe apple, we've got some apple skin. Apple skin is something that we might associate with some yeast contact. We've got some bready aromas there this time. They are stronger in this glass of wine. I'm not telling you that this is the most autolytic, yeasty character sparkling wine you can get, but it's definitely more pronounced than wine number 1. Let's have a taste. Okay, if you weren't getting it on the nose, I think you definitely get it on the palate. That biscuity, bready aroma. This wine's had at least 12 months in contact, 1 year in contact with those dead yeast cells. So naturally, those aromas are going to be more pronounced. In terms of structure, quite a similar structure. I'd say there's a little bit more body here. I think we're into medium body in the world of sparkling wines, compared to the first one, which was definitely light-bodied. I think also on this one, you will notice some of that sweetness that comes from topping up with that liqueur d'expedition, with that sugary liquid that goes in at the end. Here we're at near sort of 11 grams per litre of sugar has gone into this final product. That's definitely noticeable, but it's in balance. It's in balance with the high acidity again. Right. So there are two regions that we will look at in our courses. We've looked at Mendoza and we've looked at Napa Valley. This is one region of the world that we don't have in our textbooks and you won't be tested on in any exams of ours. But is a new emerging region for wine production and high quality wine production. And we're right in the middle of China. This is Ningxia province in the middle of the country. This is where our third wine is coming from. This is Shandong's most recent acquisition in terms of global sparkling production. They've been there just from 2014. Okay, so before Mendoza, we had high altitude that was giving us our freshness, giving the acidity, preserving those delicate fruit aromas. In Napa, we have the effect of the sea and those fogs and those cold breezes that come in each day. In the middle of China, you can see that the influence of the sea is going to be pretty difficult. We are hundreds, thousands of miles away from the sea here. No sea influence here. We're not at a particularly high altitude in this region. It's in the foothills, but we're not at a particularly high region, certainly nothing like Mendoza. But what we've got, because we're right in the middle of the country and right in the middle of this big land mass, what we describe this climate as is continental. And this has a really high continentality, we say. And basically what that means is the difference between summer temperatures and winter temperatures is massive. Quite warm summers, very cold winters. Very cold. To protect their vines here, they're going to bury them each year in about 30 centimeters of soil to protect them from those freezing conditions in the middle of winter. Okay, and just get that natural insulation from the earth. It also means that on a day-to-day basis, we have a similar temperature fluctuation between day and night. So similar here to Mendoza, the differences between the middle of the day and the middle of the night are huge. And that's going to help get ripe fruit, but also retain the acidity, retain the delicate aromas with the cool nights. So that's how they're able to produce such fantastic wines. We've also got a relatively short growing period. There's not going to be a long hang time in this region in China because there's a very harsh and quick start to the winter where you need to get out in the vineyard and start burying your vines. So you better have picked your grapes weeks before, really. So, let's have a smell, let's have a taste. You may have noticed it's a different colour. So, this is a rosé wine. Sparkling wine is pretty much unique in the fact that to make a rosé, you can simply add some red wine into some white wine. Okay, this is not through your base wine production going through a typical rosé maceration process. You've got a base red wine and you're putting a little bit of it into your white wine before the second fermentation, before you put it in the bottle. Okay? Let's have a smell, let's have a taste. Okay, fantastic. We've got a slightly different flavour profile again. We do have some of that yeasty, lees, autolytic character. But I'd say actually what stands out here is a really nice sort of fresh fruit. You get strawberry, you get peaches, you still get some of that citrus character, a little bit of orange skin almost coming through, like orange peel. So you've got this red fruit character from your Pinot Noir press grapes, but also that slight bit of red wine that you're blending into it. And to achieve a colour like this, they're going to have to put a decent amount of red wine in to achieve a colour that's actually relatively strong. We describe this as a medium intensity in terms of colour. So some fruit characters also going to come from that process. In terms of the structure of the wine though, we're quite similar to those wines before. We've got high acidity, we're off dry again. We can feel that sugar, and we're again at about 11 grams of sugar per litre. And you can detect that on the tongue. If you really concentrate on the central part of your tongue, you can feel a bit of sweetness when you taste this wine. Okay? And I think we've got a lovely long finish as well. We're dealing with wines of all sort of quite different character in some way in terms of their flavour profile, but the structures are reasonably similar, and all the quality levels are actually reasonably similar. I put all of these in a very good category, because they've got that nice long finish, they've got a decent complexity of character, and they've got those fruit aromas coming through, which is really important. And that balance here is really from a little bit of sugar going in at the end to balance off that really high acidity. If you have really high acidity and you haven't put that little sugar in the end, perhaps these are going to taste a little bit harsh. Okay? You will see zero dosage wines, no sugar going in at the end, but they tend to be reserved for the warmer climates. So it's quite common to see that in Cava. It's starting to become more and more popular in the sparkling regions of Italy, certainly like Franciacorta. You're starting to see these zero dosage wines, because you don't need to balance that same really searing high acidity that we associate with champagne and sparkling wines made in similar cool climates. Right, I will leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us. As I say, get that app because it's really useful if you're a student or a bit of a geek or just completely forget what you tasted the week before. Then get this app, keep all your notes there. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for listening. Feel free to join us for our later sessions. If you're German speakers, actually I should mention that because they are both in German this afternoon, cocktails and sake. But thank you very much, and ask me any questions if you have any.